I don't think I've been this excited for a Sonic game in a long time. As a matter of fact, I don't think I've been this hyped since Sonic Generations. So I don't want to bore you with the same old Sonic had a rough transition to 3D fluff or the whole, '06 or Sonic Boom tired talking points. But I will tell you that the more they showed of Sonic Frontiers leading up to the release, the more and more my interest was piqued. I tend to keep my expectations for Sonic games somewhat even so that I don't end up massively disappointed, because I've been through peaks and valleys with this series all my life, But after some initially shaky previews this past summer that turned out to be based on early builds of the game, every showing afterwards looked pretty good actually. Then they started showing off more of the music of the game, which is never something to be worried about when you're thinking Sonic games, depending on your preference, and right before the release they topped off all the hype with a prologue animation starring Knuckles, which tied the game's lore all the way back to Sonic Adventure. You gotta understand how excited this made me, because the Sonic Adventure games, it's no secret that most of the fan base consider them the zenith of 3D Sonic games, me included, so I found myself immediately hooked by this and I was really excited for when the game dropped. But I did keep in mind how I felt before all of that so that I didn't get drawn in too hard by the pre-release hype. In the week before the launch, I managed to get a hold of the game a little early, and almost 20 hours in I definitely had thoughts. And then I ran it back for another playthrough that I managed to finish in around 15 hours. So, now that I've completed the game almost twice over, I decided to put pen to paper and do a review. So now that the game's out, there's 3 questions that's been on everyone's minds. First, obviously, is the game good? Second, did Ian Flynn bringing his expertise from writing for the Sonic comics to this game actually make the story more palatable? And third, and most importantly, is Sonic back? Well, I personally hope I can bring something of value to that conversation with this video here, so without further ado, here is my review of Sonic Frontiers on PlayStation 5.
Hey, yo, Giant, let's go!
I want to go ahead and give a spoiler warning right away since the game is so new and I've seen that many people are actually interested in the story of this game. But I do think it's important to make sure that you're aware that the game has multiple endings, with the true ending being locked behind hard mode apparently, so if you do not want a synopsis that might ruin any of the mystique otherwise, I'll throw a timestamp here for you. But that's pretty much the only warning I'm going to give throughout this entire video, so you can go ahead and be aware, but I'm going to go ahead and get into the story. Sonic Frontiers opens with a scene of Eggman in some forest somewhere finding a structure identical to the one Knuckles found in the prologue animation. Side note, I don't feel like you're missing anything important if you don't watch that animation, but it's really cool and it's only 6 minutes, so you should watch it. I mean, it's free. Anyway, Eggman puts a gadget on it that activates it, and he gets surrounded by the same entities that jumped Knux, and his gadget starts to get absorbed by the structure, leading to Eggman grabbing at it and getting pulled within it. Hard cut to Sonic, Tails, and Amy flying to the main setting of the game, Starfall Islands. They came to investigate because the Chaos Emeralds were mysteriously drawn here, but before they can even land, they get sucked into a portal that transports Sonic to the game's first cyberspace stage. Upon completing it, he escapes cyberspace and ends up on the island all alone, guided by a disembodied voice beckoning him to defeat the Titans to save his friends. With little more than that, Sonic begins to explore this first island, Kronos Island, and not long after, Sonic finds and frees Amy, with the act itself seeing this weird cyber energy getting absorbed by Sonic, which offers him power, but it's nonetheless concerning because at this time, we don't know whether or not that's actually dangerous for him. Once freed, Amy is present and aware of Sonic, but is stuck in between dimensions and unable to offer physical assistance to Sonic. This leaves Sonic, in a sense, isolated on these islands looking for a way to truly save Amy and Tails. He also later finds Knuckles on the island, trapped after his time in the spotlight with the prologue animation, but this game sums that up in a sentence that would really feel like a nothing statement if you hadn't watched the prologue. During this journey, he runs into this character that looks like whoever designed her was a real big fan of Nier Automata, that we later learn is named Sage. In her first appearances, she offers nothing more than vague warnings to Sonic and threatening him with her ability to apparently summon the Titans that Sonic needs to defeat and triggering their aggro on him. Sonic tried to fight the first one, and it quickly becomes apparent that his base power is not enough to take them down, so he sets off to collect the Chaos Emeralds in order to defeat these Titans. During his exploration, he has interactions with the characters that he finds on each island, and occasionally even Sage. The interactions with Sonic's friends offer a little more context to the story in a piecemeal fashion, and they'll usually offer side quests that will also yield Chaos Emeralds in some points. These also typically involve the island's inhabitants, the Coco. The Coco are these little rock people that we soon see have a pretty tragic history shown in flashbacks that also show them taking on these forms that are more than a little familiar if you've ever seen another watery looking creature in the series. While we try to decipher the meaning of these scenes, which show them being taken out by some mysterious enemy, the interactions with Sage show her being incredibly vague about who she is and what her motivations are, while also continuing to be antagonistic towards Sonic and his friends. In reality, she's trying to understand him with this AI-like approach to building information on her foes, and we see that while she won't say it to his face, sometimes she remains just far and disconnected enough from the scene that she can show fascination with her supposed enemies. In between these, you see scenes where Eggman is off on his own in cyberspace, unable to escape, and occasionally interacting with Sage, who was apparently created by Eggman. So she's acting in his stead as opposition to Sonic while also gathering info on how to free Eggman from his cyber sabbatical. I'll go ahead and explain the rest of what happens on this island, but I'll probably generalize a lot of the plot afterward because the whole middle section of the game is fluff that follows the same formula across the rest of the islands. Eventually, Sonic takes on the first Titan, Giganto, who's in possession of the last Chaos Emerald on the island, and after climbing it, he claims the emerald, goes Super Saiyan, and takes it out. After he defeats the Titan, that original disembodied voice that told Sonic to take out the Titans tells him that he needs to continue on this path and take out the other Titans to be free of this situation. To this end, he flies out to the next island before being shot out of the sky by a random laser that knocks him out of his super form and sees the Chaos Emeralds spread across the next island as if they were the fucking Dragon Balls, and thus this becomes the formula for the rest of the game. Explore the island, free your friend and get powered up by the weird, clearly corruptive energy, collect the Chaos Emeralds while your friends glean whatever info they can from the Coco about their tragic history, confront Sage at multiple points, and eventually take out the next Titan, onto the next, etc, etc. By the time you reach the 4th of the 5 islands in this game, Sonic is literally dragging himself along as freeing his friends and interacting with all these ruins leads to him taking on so much cyber energy that it begins to fully corrupt him. On the 4th island, Sonic is instructed to disable these towers that apparently serve as the final seal. And it's during this mission to disable these towers that Sonic gets the rest of the flashbacks that flesh out the ancient story and thus drive you more towards the climax of the game. In them, we see that the ancients fled their destroyed home from some unstoppable enemy and landed on our world. They proceeded to create all the tech seen on these islands and that they were the ones who created the Titans. Before they all ended up dying off, one brave warrior sacrificed himself to seal the threat within his Titan and sealing off the entity that is the real threat of this game. By the time we get all of this info, Sonic freezes in place as his friends get freed when he disables the last tower. They barely get time to process Sonic's sacrifice before the disembodied voice lets it be known that they were freed and can proceed to destroy everything and... Hey, who put Shadow of the Colossus in my damn Sonic game? It's all real clear at this point. The Titans, all in their own arenas that you had to explore before finding and confronting them, the epic showdowns that were each pretty unique, the disembodied voice guiding you to defeat them, corrupting the main hero until he's out of commission while freeing the big bad. I can't believe I didn't see this sooner. But in a pivot from that game's plot, Sonic's friends go back into cyberspace and remove the corruption from Sonic, allowing him to take on the 4th and final Titan, with the help of Eggman and Sage, after Sage begs him to align with Sonic to stop the world-ending threat, as it's the only way she can see everyone surviving, to which he reluctantly agrees. Eggman and Sage help Sonic find the Chaos Emeralds once more, and he engages the final Titan, simply called Supreme, but he doesn't manage to defeat it before the enemy escapes and starts to reform in space. Sage takes over Supreme, and the newly formed duo fly into space to take on this final threat, a giant planetoid called The End, and the fight plays out as a bullet hell where you shoot light and dark bullets while switching colors and... Oh, who the fuck put Ikaruga in my Sonic game? It's such a shift, and if you're not used to bullet hells, this might not be your cup of tea, but eventually you'll triumph over this moon that loves waxing poetic about the futility of resisting it. It takes everything Sonic has, and the sacrifice of Sage piloting the final Titan into it to end the end, but it's over. And Sonic flies back down to Earth and watches the ensuing meteor shower in the distance with his friends while Eggman is off on his own mourning the loss of his artificial daughter. And I'm not just saying that for, dramatic effect. Right before he lets her go on the flight, he calls her that and she refers to him as father more than once. It's honestly a pretty simple ending, but it's also a little bittersweet. And then the credits roll, but at the end, we see not only Sonic and friends prepare to leave Starfall Islands on the tornado, but we get one last shot of Eggman accessing an ancient computer and managing to salvage Sage's existence through, I'm assuming, her being backed up in the cyberspace.
That's my girl.
And that's Sonic Frontiers. Honestly, I didn't think the story was overly amazing, and I found the beats from other games I mentioned a little jarring, but overall, it was a pretty straightforward story that was pretty compelling to see through. Some would, and have, chided it as too self-serious, but I guess I would only give it that in juxtaposition against Sonic's more Saturday morning-esque escapades in recent years. It certainly didn't come off as corny as what Sonic Forces went for, and that alone is a win in my book. And given that we've got a somewhat happy ending, I'll take it. The middle section was a little empty though. It feels like everything important only happens near the beginning and near the climax, but it helps that it was filled in by some of Sonic's gameplay, I think. Sonic Frontiers continues the series' modern boost formula with some additions that tighten up the controls to allow for more freedom of control. Firstly, you're able to get into the settings and fine-tune all of the aspects of Sonic's controls in order to make him control exactly the way you want. You need him to take off at a certain speed when he boosts? How about how quickly he can hit his top speed when exploring? Maybe tuning his sensitivity when turning? All of these are options that you can actually use to influence and make this version of Sonic play exactly how you want. It's honestly refreshing to have that much freedom of choice in how you want to handle him. Speaking of freedom, Sonic Frontiers is an open world Sonic game. However, if you recall the Adventure Era's hub worlds that you could freely explore as you made your way to the game's action stages, this game feels loosely like that, but with a much grander scale to it, with less meaningless NPCs in the mix. As you explore the Starfall Island, you travel across these huge landscapes with a blank map that you'll eventually fill out by solving puzzles. The puzzles are honestly child's play, but I'm honestly grateful for that because I would absolutely hate to get hung up on a stupid puzzle to activate what is basically an Assassin's Creed style viewpoint with next to none of the climbing involved. But they also provide you with attack and defense seeds. Those, along with the Cocos you find around the island, are used as currencies to increase Sonic's stats at these Elder and Hermit Cocos. Yeah, you heard that right. Sonic has upgradable stats in this, of which there are 4: speed, attack, defense, and ring capacity, aka life. Each stat can go up to level 99, but the place where you feel this the most is in Sonic's speed. He does not start off fast at all, which might feel a little weird considering what we've come to expect in a boost style game, but it doesn't really take a long time to get a sense of momentum back into Sonic's boost. I was around level 7 by the time I got to the second island, and there was a very noticeable difference in where you start. I don't think I'd have ever wanted to see this RPG light type of system come back after being so far removed from the Unleashed days, but I feel that it is implemented in a better way here. You also won't feel the need to fully level up any of Sonic's stats, honestly, but they are there, so you'll naturally want to see how far you can go. You also get this power boost mechanic that triggers what I call movie Sonic mode by filling Sonic's ring cap that leads to a lightning aura super boost, which honestly makes upgrading Sonic's regular speed feel a little redundant. But thankfully, it's also pretty easy to get lots of these seeds and Cocos, especially when you find who facilitates the fishing minigame. I'll just cut to the chase with this. I don't hate it. It's easy as hell, and you spend these purple coins you find in the world to cast lines, and you get tokens for each catch, no matter what it is, that you exchange for all kinds of collectibles, such as the aforementioned seeds, progression necessary items, egg memos that give you insight into what Eggman's been doing this whole time, which are pretty entertaining listens, and 20 Coco bundles that absolutely shatter the need to explore and grind early on if you're savvy enough. It's not required, but it's actually a fun distraction with good benefits, so points to Frontiers for not making me roll my eyes at the inclusion of Big the Cat in another Sonic game for once. Going back to things you don't expect from Sonic games though, there is a skill tree. Sonic has expanded combat options that see him using moves based in his speed and existing skills. He even gets a move called the Sonic Boom, so either we're getting a Street Fighter crossover soon or Gao's gonna have to get a lawyer. Gone are the days where all you got was the homing attack and sometimes the stomp as your go-to options for dispatching enemies in exchange for creative and fluid ways to spice it up. Provided that you're spending time exploring and fighting, you'll get tons of XP to stock up on skill points, and it actually won't be very long before you've unlocked everything, so I take it as a positive that this game doesn't feel very grind heavy, although I will say that some moves near the end of the skill tree get a little samey. I'll also note that a lot of the enemies are all the same type of weird faceless robot thingy that'll occasionally do one thing different, like in the second island where it transforms into a pillar that'll deflect your attacks unless you use the new Psyloop move, which involves drawing a circle with this cyber energy trail that Sonic lets off. In battles, it breaks defenses and pops enemies up, leaving them free to get bodied by all your new moves. And in the field, it can be spammed ad nauseum to get rings. I do this to stay in power boost mode because fuck not having power boost on, and sometimes collectibles with no repercussions because there's no cooldown or anything for this move. There's plenty of ways to style on these literal bot enemies, but the variety of enemies kinda doesn't justify the need for all these cool moves. I'll take them, absolutely, but you get to a point where you wish there was a little bit more challenge to it all, but maybe that's the Devil May Cry fan in me finding some equatability here, with most of the attacks tied to one button. Maybe that's also a byproduct of the sheer ease and becoming a little OP early on, who knows. This extends to the story progression systems as well. In order to progress through the game, there are exclusive collectibles for this end as well. Firstly, you have to beat these mini-boss enemies called Guardians to get portal gears that you then use to unlock the portals for the cyber stages. These are recreations of stages from Sonic's memories, which have the biggest quotation marks because some of these are definitely layouts from Shadow stages in Sonic Adventure 2. Not a complaint though. You beat these and you get vault keys that you use to free up some of the Chaos Emeralds in the world. The rest you get through the side quests with the island-specific buddy you have to free in the overworld. You unlock these interactions with memory tokens, which serve the same function but are aesthetically different per buddy. And you can find these tokens either by exploration, combat, fishing, or as I mentioned earlier, spamming the side loop. These lead to cutscenes that yield interactions with Sonic's friends that often reference the entire history of Sonic's series, be it the games, specifically Adventure 1, or the Sonic comics. They also give you some history for the Cocos that's honestly pretty depressing, and these cute little bastards are tragic things, my goodness. But through these interactions, you'll eventually find the last emerald you need before you get the 7th. How do you get that one? Boss fights. Each of the game's Titan bosses are holding the 7th emerald, and it's your job to scale them, snatch it, then go super and body them in a fight before moving to the next island. This is the cycle that pervades the entire game for better or worse, because it doesn't seem tedious at all when you're on the first island, but subsequent islands just seem to get larger and more complicated or just vague to explore, which then drags the progression a little bit. It's this cyclical nature of progression that can actually feel monotonous up to a certain point. But by and large, these gripes that I'm stating don't often get in the way so much that I'm not having a good time. It's just something you'll slowly become more aware of as time passes. And it's something that I'm glad I can actually spam the fishing minigame for, because then I can just focus on exploring and sometimes fighting. Speaking of fighting again, the Guardians that hold the portal gears are actually pretty cool. This is where you start seeing actual variety in the enemy types, and each often come off as dual purpose, with fighting them being the clear goal, but with opening them up requiring testing you via platforming and reflexes in a familiar manner to anyone versed in Sonic's boost gameplay. These are shining examples of how the combat could have been more creative on the more small-scale fights, but I'm glad that they're interesting enough to break up the monotony in some way, while also posing themselves as more important than fighting off cyber fodder. But then not too long in, you find that this game totally rips off the Blood Moon thing from Breath of the Wild, which as hard as I tried to avoid it, doesn't help in deflecting the comparisons that people will eventually make. This Starfall event signifies the world filling back up with defeated enemies while also filling the world with these star fragments that activate this slot machine that honestly just blocks too much of the damn screen. But I guess it's Sonic, so we just have to have some sort of casino element in it. Truthfully, it happens on its own, requiring no input other than collecting the fragments, but the benefit is that it gives you a surplus of purple coins to abuse the fishing minigame, but I just wish it wasn't so in your face. I guess that just makes me glad that it doesn't really happen obnoxiously often. That tangent aside, the reason I had to bring it up is because it also respawns Guardians, and though you might think that's a plus, offering incentive to repeat fights for more gears on top, no, they don't often respawn drops, so then what's the point? It just makes me want to avoid certain fights, like the Sand Shark in the second island, which was a cool set piece the first time I did it, but the fight takes way too long for me to want to do it again for no reward. At that point, let them stay dead. Fuck it. I hope they go extinct. Darwinism in full effect. I'm the fittest. I survived. You didn't. Take the L and don't come back, bitch. There are concepts and design here that I would consider a sort of half flop, but the sheer variety and gameplay throughout is honestly super engaging and usually, thankfully, brief. But most of it comes off like spectacles and rapid fire. The openness of the world is refreshing, the cyber stages are nostalgic and familiar, if a little wonky with the physics and the boost being nerfed as hell in the 2D or the rail sections, and combat just being so visually satisfying for styling on enemies. It doesn't all stick the landing or feel justified in some senses, but I'm feasting regardless. There's a lot to love in Frontiers' presentation as well, but it's also the most contentious part of the game, I'd say. There was plenty of talk about how rough it looked when it first got revealed, and while I don't think that's due to change in the discourse, I also think that some of what I've seen complained about in other videos and read in written reviews are not specifically what Sonic fans would be focused on when they're looking to play their games. That said, the game's variety doesn't begin and end at its mechanics, and I still think that it's an interesting package, warts and all. Starting with the open worlds, each island has a certain aesthetic, whether it be the rainy meadows of the beginning Chronos Island, Island, the vast deserts of Ares Island and beyond, many of these islands contain a somber atmosphere. They all contain ruins and loads of nature that carry the vibe of places that were once full of life and are now dead. Some are brighter than others, but the worlds are largely devoid of the light and atmosphere of previous games. Cyber stages usually make up for this, evoking the generation style aesthetic of the stages, but there's basically 4 main looks in them: Green Hill, Chemical Plant, Sky Sanctuary, and this Cyber City Highway look. There are lots of cyber stages, so I could hear the complaint that this game needed more themes to pull from, but I think it's important to remember that these stages are all very short. Most are only around a minute, and longer ones only barely crack 2 minutes. They're largely optional too, since you can obtain vault keys through other means, but I'll also say that I dig the whole glitchy background deal, considering that these are reconstructions that are clearly not perfect recreations, seeing as how a lot of these stage layouts have no relation to the aesthetic itself, but rather your or Sonic's memory of how stages felt. When you're done, you're let back into these depressing settings, and these zones are a far cry from what we're used to seeing in regards to its aesthetic. That generally doesn't excuse it looking a little generic and empty, but I think that was by design, and tonally that sets an entirely different experience from what we've experienced with everything Sonic related since Colors. Even in the writing, there's been lots of talk about how the story itself is being too serious, but if you're a Sonic fan that's older than, I don't know, 12, you'll remember the days when, yeah, Sonic always had a little bit of serious in it, mixed in with all the cartoony antics. Ever since the first game, the plot revolved around a blue animal thwarting a guy who kidnapped animals and turned them into machines. There were multiple cartoons with different tones, an anime that adapted the most popular games of the series, Adventure 1 and 2, in its run, which, need I remind you that one of the most prevalent aspects of Sonic Adventure 2's plot is that Shadow the Hedgehog is bent on revenge for the murder of one of his only friends in life due to a government cleanup operation that saw a bunch of scientists getting killed in space. And then there are multiple comic continuities that are much beloved by fans, and for many reasons. All that is to say that Sonic's tone is all over the place, but original, or dare I say older fans, remember a time where the stories were at least somewhat consistent in tone and didn't constantly get assaulted with Saturday morning cartoon vibes in the games. I've been going on a bunch of tangents, but if I had to tie this to a single point, it's that this entire game is presented in a way that respects older fans. Maybe it's a little in your face with how much it doesn't want to come off cartoony, but this game rewards you for knowing Sonic, games and more, while not being antagonistic to newer, younger fans. There's a balance here that respects you for being a Sonic fan, new and old. I've already mentioned the prologue animation with Knuckles referencing Adventure 1, but in a cutscene, Sonic even mentions Tikal during a conversation with Knuckles. And Knuckles even recalls when he first met Sonic in Sonic 3 after looking at some ruins that remind him of Angel Island's architecture. At some point during exploration, Sonic even mentions Tango the Lemur, who is apparently a popular character from the IDW comics. I never read those, but I can only imagine how excited that makes fans of those stories.
I bet Tangle would love climbing around these ruins.
Sonic even mentions the Mystic Ruins, a locale from Adventure, while looking at some waterfalls on Kronos Island.
What a view! Makes me think of the falls and Mystic Ruins.
There are so many Easter eggs woven into casual conversation and the DNA of this game, and those conversations are carried by strong voice direction. This game brings back pretty much all of the voice cast that we're familiar with, but they're given more to work with than being quippy and rapid fire joking. I think that might have been why there's always been such criticism of Roger Craig Smith's portrayal of Sonic. He sounds older and has a voice more associated with serious roles, so sticking him behind a character that was, well, characterized as a sarcastic jokester, he felt kinda off. He was hardly ever giving writing and direction beyond being witty and casual about everything. But here, Sonic feels alone, and he worries about his friends. He holds real conversations, recalls a time long thought forgotten in this series that lets you know that this Sonic is seasoned. And yeah, he still quips, but the dialogue is given room to breathe, and it comes off stronger for that alone. The other characters generally get stronger direction too, as well as giving them agency. Though they may be in need of rescue, they're still able to interact and survey, providing Sonic with intel that they glean from the environment or the Cocos, showing you that they're active in the background of the plot, not just waiting for their savior. Even Sage, a character that seems so out of place in such a series, is often seen musing in the background about things she's trying to understand. She's extremely antagonistic to Sonic in front of his face, but then you see her watching from afar, analyzing his behavior and trying to understand his motives, which seems so alien to her given that she can't understand his willingness to put himself in danger. She even gets confused at one point by Eggman complimenting Sonic's efforts, failing to understand the respect that Eggman has for Sonic despite being his bitter enemy. It's also helped that in both English and Japanese she's voiced by the voice actresses that play Rei Ayanami from Evan fucking Gellion, Ryan Bartley, and Megumi Hayashibara respectively. That is a perfect choice on both fronts given how cold, detached, but ultimately inquisitive this character comes across. Funny story about that too. Before I knew this, I was showing gameplay I'd recorded to Migsby, and when he saw the first Titan Giganto, he out loud said, "We got Evangelion enemies in Sonic now?" So when we learned about the casting, we laughed our asses off about how spot on that was. This was super intentional. You cannot convince me otherwise. Mind you, all of this either requires you to have a somewhat higher than average knowledge of Sonic, or at least have some sort of investment outside of this particular game. When you look at the way the story is given to you within Frontiers, it's pretty basic, but not in a bad way. It's cohesive and straightforward, so the whole "it's too serious" vibe just feels like a tonal whiplash if you're over familiar with the modern games, or, I don't know, the Sonic Boom cartoon, and thinking that this was going to stay in the same lane. I felt like I talked a lot about story and voice acting after moving on from the story breakdown, but it should be said that this is most definitely an element of presentation that will have people talking for a while. Going back to aesthetics and things of that nature, Sonic and all the other characters look like you'd expect, although it looks like they made Sonic's quills shorter, which I think is a nice little update. The crew are all still expressive in scenes, but not in an overdone way, and Sonic's run animation is really good. Looking at it from the side, I even get the impression that he runs similarly to Adventure 1, but that's probably just me, I don't know. When Sonic runs off of ramps or other surfaces and gets some airtime, he starts doing a bunch of flippy stuff that looks pretty cool, instead of just floating with his hands up. And you can do tricks after unlocking the skill that allows it. A lot of the special effects are pretty cool and all too, but then it makes me think about one thing: the pop-in. The draw distance has been a big talking point about this game ever since its reveal, so I won't gloss over it too much, but in my experience, it doesn't really break the game or anything. It does happen a lot, but oftentimes I'm too busy flying around stages to notice. Regardless, there's many times that I'll be platforming and I'm ending up hitting a boost ring or something like that locks my animation or like my forward momentum, and then things will pop in that are not that far from you. So while I think it'll happen in ways that won't demand serious reaction times or break your flow, I will acknowledge that this is something that should be more polished. It doesn't ruin my fun at all, but the more you play, the more you notice it, and it can be distracting when it shouldn't, especially when everything else runs so smooth. At least on my PS5 copy, this game is running at a buttery smooth frame rate and it feels fluid, which helps keep you immersed in the sense of speed. I also ran into a few bugs here and there, and times when the camera had a mind of its own, which led to either me falling in pits and cyber stages or running sideways off a wall when I should have been going up, but this actually wasn't a persistent problem. I guess it really does come off as a growing pain with this formula of Sonic gameplay where the camera was always locked in one of two directions, but hopefully this is something they figure out in whatever they make next. Another thing that I love in this game is the music. Holy shit, the music! Sonic having amazing soundtracks is nothing new, but this game has something entirely else going on. The main composer and sound director for this game, Tomoya Otani, put together a soundtrack that, much like the rest of the game, pays homage to pretty much all of Sonic. In the open world, every island has a unique orchestral backing track that you'll be familiar with if you watched any of the early videos. But when you're in the cyber stages, you get these high energy electronic tracks that lend well to that side of the game. But the highlight, the boss fight music. Oh my god, these are so good. Between the sheer scale of the battle arenas being supersonic and the blaring, screaming hard rock tracks, each and every boss fight feels like an endgame boss from any other Sonic game. This is where I feel like the game shines the hardest. You get everything here visually, paired with your full control of Sonic and amped up versions of your available skills turned up to 11. Even if there are parts of the fight that can be a little cheap, such as the camera turning away from you in the Giganto fight if he hits you and sends you flying, leaving you open to follow-up hits, these are easily the best payoffs to every island you could ask for. Payoffs so great that they, along with other promising aspects, largely overshadow the problems that definitely exist in this game. I'll be frank and say that this isn't a perfect game, but when you're a Sonic fan for long enough, you learn to temper expectations enough to see the ambition when you're given a package with as much promise as this. Not every part of it stands on its own, but there's something here that shows we're standing on the precipice of a new frontier, pun intended, for Sonic. If they follow up with this foundation, maybe instead of saying, hey, we got something really good for a Sonic game, we'll finally be able to flat out say, we have an amazing game. But that said, it really looks like Sonic is back. I think we've gotten the best 3D Sonic game since Adventure 2, and with this, I can safely say, Welcome back, old friend. It's kind of funny how as I was writing a video for Sonic Adventure, this game rewarded me for reinvesting myself in what was my favorite era of Sonic. But I'm pretty sure mine may not be a wholly uncontestable opinion of Sonic Frontiers. So feel free to let me know how you feel, because I'm very interested this go around to see how you feel about this game as well. So don't hesitate to leave a comment. I'll be kind of restructuring my Sonic Adventure script so that it doesn't feel like it was an afterthought. But if anything, that video that I had planned in the meantime may take a little bit to come out after this. Who knows if that'll be done next or something else will take the stage in the interim. We'll see. Until then, I thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video, and I'll see you on the next one.